So, everything good and bad about the Gen 8 Pokemon games. Now, originally I did plan to do another video first. Obviously, how to make Pokemon a bit more difficult. Safe to say, I kind of did not have that video planned out very well. So, of course, I'll be moving on with the Gen 8 video of this series. Of course, like always, I'm taking a look at the pros of the Gen 8 games. So, of course, this is going to be Pokemon Sword, Shield, Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and Legends Arceus. So, let's get into the review. Of course, retrospective. Of course, that is, of course, the story, region, characters, and DLC are absolutely wonderful. Now, of course, with story, I kind of mean this with, like, kind of about BDSP, and of course, Legends and the DLC based on Shield, and it's kind of disappointing. Not much interesting. Like, yeah, Rose, he's kind of an interesting villain, but compared to other villains, he's a bit of a letdown. The DLC is definitely much better, in my opinion, but the other two games, well, other three games, it kind of felt like they did a much better job. Next up, we of course have BDSP and Legends bringing more interest in Sinnoh. I think this was a good thing that happened with these games. Sinnoh being remade, and of course a new game being in the main series, I think brought a lot more interest in the Gen 4 games, which was really good because I liked them a lot, and it was nice having them get some attention, even if they are flawed. Of course, next up, we of course have evolutions to older Pokemon plus Dynamaxing. This was pretty cool. I actually really liked them adding new evolutions to Pokemon like Yonmask and of course Corsola. Dynamaxing was also pretty interesting and made some battles challenging, which I like. It was also cool because BDSP were extremely challenging games, especially the Elite Four. Same with Legends Arceus for sending noble Pokemon, and of course that Volo fight. Of course, we also have improved the customization in Sword and Shield, which was nice. Sun and Moon were good about customization, but a bit of a step back compared to X and Y. Same with Let's Go. Sword and Shield was definitely impressive. It just kind of sucks that their two games didn't really have interesting customization for the most part. Next up, we of course have new HMs, and of course the Grand Underground made catching some Pokemon easier. Personally, this was something that I really enjoyed about these two games, and that's because, well, some Pokemon just were that easier to catch. Aside from Nincada and Spinda, but of course I'll get into that later on. Also, I gotta add that Legends gameplay was pretty interesting for the most part, but definitely could have been improved. I'm honestly mixed about this game. I'll get into that more in the negative. But for the most part, the Gen 8 games are actually pretty spectacular. But of course, as always, every Pokemon game is flawed no matter what. So let's of course uncover some of the controversy that this gen got into, starting off with the national decks. So obviously, the first complaint we have is, of course, the national decks being cut out and Pokemon returning for DLC. Now, as much as I do love the DLC that Pokemon has gone, making your fans pay $90 just for the full experience of the game, or even $180, it's a little anti-consumer. When it was revealed that the national dex was removed from Sword and Shield and wasn't going to be in there, it caused a lot of controversy. And yeah, you could probably explain that technically Sun and Moon, X and Y, and Ruby and Sapphire kind of did this, but at the same time, excluding Ruby and Sapphire and kind of X and Y, actually, never mind, you can actually just kind of complain about that a lot. Honestly, removing the national dex is kind of a stupid idea, and the reasons why just kind of made the issues worse. Next up, we of course have controversy over some of the dumbest things. Yeah, so this is kind of talking about the tree. Personally, I don't really care about Pokemon's graphics, but at the same time, I will definitely admit that these games do need some more time in the oven. I will, of course, get more on that later, and of course in the Gen 9 video. But safe to say, there was some stupid controversies over these games. I've seen some fans just straight up act terrible with these games, but at the same time, again, Pokemon wasn't doing themselves many favors with that. Of course, next up, we, of course, have the Pokedex was, of course, difficult to complete because of weather conditions, and of course, raid dens just being absolutely terrible. I don't know if I've really gone into raid dens, but frankly, the AI for them is just completely stupid, and it's kind of because of them that raid dens just kind of became that more tedious, kind of requiring you to transfer Pokemon from home. More on that later. Of course, with the Pokedex being too difficult to complete because of other conditions, yeah, that kind of made it kind of more of a pain to complete, making it so that you had to rely on home. Not saying that Nintendo did this on purpose. I'm just saying that it's because of the programming for some of these games. Not while it's not faulty, it's just kind of tedious. Having to wait for certain weather conditions just for a few Pokemon isn't really fun. Of course, next up we of course have Legends feels like fan service the game. A controversial con of this list. Now, I mean, it's safe to say that I really did not enjoy Legends Arceus, and more likely, I'm probably not going to enjoy Legends ZA. I can appreciate what these games do. I mean, they definitely were a breath of fresh air, but at the same time, Legends just feels a bit fan servicey. It just kind of feels like they tried squeezing in as many cine references as they can, even if they didn't really have an idea with what to do with certain characters. It's an interesting game, but at the same time, it's just unneeded. Next up, we of course have, well, BDSP having no Gen 5 through 8 Pokemon. Yeah, probably one of my biggest issues with BDSP, aside from the chibi style. It worked, but at the same time, it kind of made some characters look off. Yeah, having no Gen 5 through 8 Pokemon in BSP was definitely one of the dumbest decisions. Frankly, due to the fact that every other remake, aside from Let's Go, has had that generation's Pokemon in it. Fire and Leaf Green had all the way up to Deoxys. Heart Gold and Soul Silver had all the way to Arceus. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire had all the way up to Volcanion. BDSP? And you just got Arceus. Sure, you can actually get some of the mythicals. Well, you can get some of the Gen 4 mythicals in these games now through Legends Arceus. But at the same time, these games just feel more like glorified remasters than actual remakes, which is kind of sad. Ghost and me, of course, have unusable moves. Yeah, Sword and Shield kind of killed a lot of moves for Pokemon, which isn't even understandable. And honestly, probably the reason why these games got criticized so much. Next up, we of course have Bowling Legendaries and the post game. Yeah, going back to Sword and Shield. I promise I don't dislike Sword and Shield, but again, it is probably one of the most flawed entries in the series, which is unfortunate. So of course, this is talking about these two. Yeah, honestly, that is the most uninteresting legendaries that we've ever gotten in any games. Even Scarlet Violet, games that were kind of flawed, had better legendaries than these two. At least Koraidon and Miraidon actually had a personality. Zygon, Zygon and Xerneas and Yveltal kind of have a personality. Solgaloo and Lunala, same thing. You know, Zekrom and Reshiram, same thing, even though they're just kind of plot devices for whatever N and Getsus were doing. These two, yeah, they appear in a story, but they just don't really do anything. They're just kind of helping you out when Eternatus is kind of let loose, and then they appear in the post game with stupid and moron, you know, in arguably what is the worst post game in the series. And this is saying something because Pokemon's had some uninteresting post games. But safe to say, honestly, I'm not a fan of these two. Next up, we of course have, well, the games lag and freeze at times. This is probably the most really hard to excuse con of these games. Now, Legends Arceus is excused from this because in my about I think 60 hours, I only had that game crash once. I put 100 hours in both Sword and Shield and BDSP. I've had these games crash numerous times on both the digital versions, which I had the digital version of Sword, no, Shield, and I had the digital version of Brilliant Diamond. I had the physical version of all of them, but I've had crashes happen numerous times in Pokemon Shield, as well with Brilliant Diamond. I've had a few happen in Sword. I don't think I had any happen in Shining Pearl, but it really just shows that these games needed more time in the oven. And unfortunately, that's going to be a thing in the next video. Also, I gotta say, Pokemon Home kind of sucked. But more on that in Gen 9 video, because I've actually had more issues with that in Gen 9. But overall, despite the flaws of Sword and Shield, they are not bad games. They are flawed games, but they are decent games. They have some really good ideas, but at the same time, they also have some really bad ideas. And unfortunately, I feel like they're going to be remembered more so for the controversy that got stirred up instead of actually being interesting Pokemon games. But of course, next time, I plan to probably finish up these or just do another video. But until then, goodbye, thank you all for watching, and I hope you all stay safe. And thank you for getting the channel over 10 subscribers. That means a lot.